Hi, this is the video for test 2. Test 2 will cover 4 chapters, chapter 10, 12, 13, and 14, which focuses on the process management and quality management. And there isn't any short answers questions in test 2. We only have true or false multiple choices and the calculation problems. True or false multiple choices similar to the test 1, each of them value 1 point, while the problems value 2 points each. And for the problems here, like even it's actually relates to some calculations like the math models we learned for some specific chapters here, but I will not ask you to provide the calculation process. You only need to choose the right answers I give to you. So it's really, really similar to multiple choices, but you may need to do some calculations, simple calculations. And for chapter 10, I have 3 problems, and all of them are actually for the model 1. So the model 1, we learned how to solve the weighting line problems. So we learned like the probabilities, we learned the average number waiting in line, average number waiting in the system, the average time waiting in line, average time in system. So we learned LQLS, WQWS. And you actually only need to review like how to calculate those phone numbers actually. And for the chapter 13, I have six calculations, which will be like multiple choice problems as well. And I have 2 for the R charts, 2 for the X bar charts, 2 for the P charts. So all of them actually for the control chart stuffs. We don't have any calculations here, like relates to the process equivalent, the CPK. So this is kind of a distribution like for the test 2. And now let's go over what kind of details you need to review for each chapter. And again, like if I don't mention here, it means like you don't have to review like in the textbook. You don't have to reread the textbook for that contents. So all the test questions will come from like all the stuffs I introduced here for this video. So for chapter 10, we focus on the process. We focus on how to solve the weighting problems. And the first thing you need to go over is actually the first part of chapter 10 I give to you. So it's actually a big picture about what waiting line problem is, what kinds of like the general terms, concepts you need to know before you learn more details. So it's come for the queue management suggestions. And then the second part is about the major components of Q system. And actually we have 3. We have kind of like the population, like the source of populations, the systems and others. So this is what I divided them into those 3. So we have arrival, which means like we talks about like the source of populations. Like we also talks about the distribution of the arrivals. We also talks about the patterns. We talks about like kind of priority rules and others. So for the arrival, we analyze like 5 stuffs over there, and then we move to the second components like of the queue system, which is like in the system. So we discuss like how what kinds of like the structures. So it means like it's kind of the length of the waiting, the service you have, and we also discuss like the distribution about the service time as well as the different structures on this single channel, single phase, single channel, multi-phase, multi-channel, multi-phase. So you may need to review like the different examples I give to you for the different structure. And the last one is actually exit. So exit, we discuss 2 things, like if the population which exits like the whole process, the whole system will be back. So we have 2. One is like they will be back. Another is like they have a really, really low probability to be back. So this is those 2 exits. And then the other calculation come for the last part for chapter 10, like we talks about the models. In general, we have 4 models. If it's not those 4 models, then you probably need to rely on some software or others like computer system to help you to solve them. But if this 4, you will be fine. Like you will be able to find some the functions to do some simple calculations. But for the whole chapter 10, actually, for the homework, for the test as well, we only focus on the first model, model 1. So it talks about a single channel, single phase, the population is infinite, and the arrival, like the distribution is kind of Poisson, and the priority nodes is first come, first serve, and the service pattern will yield with the exponential distribution, and the queen length is unlimited. So here is the example. And for the model 1, the calculations, like actually, we only need to focus on a few notations here. We need to understand what is the arrival rate, service rate. We probably need to understand the LQ, LS, WQ, WS. And sometimes, like for the homework, we also like need to consider like the probabilities. What if like there are more than 4 units within the system, or other probabilities here? And all the formula, the function formula you may need to use is actually comes for here. So how to calculate LQ, LS, WQ, WS, and P. And rho here is actually for model 1. We can we can understand rho here, this ratio as the utilization. So this is all the things you need to know. And for the formula sheet you prepare yourself, you can write down all the functions here as well as the notations description. So in case like you just like forget like what does mean ALQ here, so you can also like write some like the description about what the notation means as well. And this is what we have. And if you wanted to check, like if you want to review how to do that, then the example here, example 10.1 will be really helpful. So you can just like calculate the utilization average number in line, which is the LQ and LS, WQ, WS. So this is what we have. And then let's move to the chapter 12. So for chapter 12, we discussed like the quality management, but for the conceptual part, and the first thing you need to review is kind of like what is the total quality management. Actually, for chapter 12, we focus on the total quality management and Six Sigma. So they are actually these two things we need to focus on. And except for like what is the TQM you need to review, like especially like some quality rules over there, you also need to review like those slides I give to you to introduce this award. So I gave you like 3 to 4 slides to introduce the awards, and you don't have to memorize anything, but you need to look at all the slides and all the sentences I give to you on the slides, like including like what is the objective for the awards, which organization do you provide these awards, and what is the objective, and what kinds of like the improvement it can help like to improve the quality in industries and others. And then please review some like I gave you a table to list like 3 quality rules over there. And you don't have to just like remember like what the slight differences like among those 3 very important quality leaders to give us like in terms of defining the concepts in quality management. But you need to take a look about like what is kind of like the components, all of them agree. This is really important like for quality management. For example, such as like the customer focus, like you need to respect your input is continuous improvement. So take a look with that sentences I give to you. Okay. And then we move to the cost of quality, another terms you need to review. We have actually 4. We have 4 different types of cost of quality. We have prevention, appraisal, and 2 failure costs, the internal and external failure cost, as well as you need to review the dimensions. So for the dimensions, it's kind of like what kinds of factors we consider to evaluate the quality as a customer. Then as a manager, we also consider those like different dimensions to help us to improve our quality. So we have like the features, the performance, the readabilities, the aesthetics. So you need to go over what the meaning for each dimensions, and I hope you could find like the examples to describe each of them, because like in the test too, I probably will give you like a scenario and ask you which dimension it's measured. So this is what we have for the dimensions. Then we move to the second big part, like the Six Sigma, another very important philosophy we use to manage the quality. And the first thing you need to review is about the DMAIC cycle. The D means define, M means measure, analyze, and so on. So this is what you need to review, and you need to go over like the meaning of each, the letters means, as well as like you also need to give some examples. Like if I give you a scenario, like this is what they do. So I will ask you what is like the which steps for this cycle like actually they did. So this is what we have. Then about the tools, so we have different tools. Like I gave you like a slides like to list all of the tools, like including like the flowchart, fishbone, and others. And you need to go over like what kinds of like the objective for that tool, which means like what kind of things that tool can help you to manage your quality. Because like for after that, then I also give you like the details about each tools we mentioned. And the last thing you may need to review for chapter 12 is about the different like the roles and responsibilities if you want to integrate the Six Sigma into your organization. And this is all of the things you may need to review for chapter 12. Okay. Now we move to chapter 13. So chapter 13 is like a way actually learn how to do quantity management for some quantitative methods stuff aspects. So the first thing you need to figure out is actually kind of like conceptual stuff is the distinguish the different variations, because for the quality management, like especially like when we know Six Sigma, we know that the objective is to reduce the variation, then we could like improve the quality. And then when we talk about variation, we have two different variations. We have common variation, we have ascendable variation, and what they are. So common is kind of a random variations, like it happens because of the current system you use, and ascendable variation is kind of something like you can control, you can identify, and then you can manage it later. So this is the first thing you need to distinguish these two different variations. I probably will give you some examples and ask you which variation it should be. And then for the statistical process control, we also need to, for the test, you need to focus on how to do the control chart over there. As well as like you also need to review a little bit about like how to do the process capability, the CPK stuffs. But most of the questions come from the control charts. So you need to understand the attributes, control charts, variable control charts. So why we have these two different? Briefly speaking, like the attribute control chart is like it depends on like the factors you use. So if the factors you use is kind of like is the number of defects, then probably you need to choose attributes. But if the factors you use like is something like you need to measure like the length or others, then it should be variable control chart. And attribute we have p chart, c chart, while the variable we have x and r. But I will not ask you to calculate the c chart. We will only focus on p, x, and r chart. And the following slides give you all the functions formulas you may need to use to solve those like different control chart. This slide gives you how to calculate the P charts, and for any control chart, you need to find three numbers at least. So you need to find the average, you need to find the upper limits, lower limits. Once you got that three numbers, you will be able to draw that three lines. Then you can plot like the numbers into your control charts, then you will be able to find like if it's in control or out of a control. So except for like the functions here, you also need to review like how to get your conclusions. And I gave you actually two slides to describe like how to find the if it's in control or out of control. Okay. And this is the example for p-chart. If you forget how to solve the p-chart, this example will be really, really helpful for you to review it. And the following slide talks about the X-bar chart and R chart. And when you do the X-bar and R chart, please be very, very careful about the sample size because you need to use the sample size to find the A2, D3, and D4, which you are using to compute the upper and lower limits for X bar chart, R chart, respectively. Okay. And the following example here, example 13.4 will be very, really helpful. And this is chapter 13. Now the last chapter, chapter 14. So chapter 14, we talks about the link operations. And the first thing you need to go over is what it is. And please read the push system. What does mean push system? On the contrast, we have push system. So do not misunderstand these two systems. And then take a look with the Toyota production system and what kinds of waste like we may have. And actually we also need to, like, if you want to apply the lean operations, employees is really, really important. So you need to respect your people. And take a look with the lean supply chain components, what they are, and take a look with the design principles. So we have overload principles, and take a look about like what does mean quality at the source and just in time, as well as like how to do the schedules overview. And the last thing you need to review is because the above actually we focus on like how to integrate the lean operations in manufacturing, like most of the perspective we consider for the manufacturing industry, but we also be able to like apply the lean into services industry. So take a look with the lean services, which is also the last part of chapter 14. Okay, so this is all of the things like I'd like you to review for all the 4 chapters to prepare for the test too. And the last few slides, I also gave you some examples about like how to, I mean, what kinds of like the questions you may meet like for the, I mean, in the test too. So the first questions is actually comes for the tools like we use to do Six Sigma. So a flowchart as part of Six Sigma quality improvement process may be found in which the MAIC category. So this is what I ask you to review the DMAIC. So a flowchart is help us, like this is what you just learned for the chapter 9. It help us to visualization the whole process. So this is actually can be found for the define step. So this is what we have, like this define step is actually the first step here. Okay. And the second question, so the variation in production system that is caused by factors that can be clearly identified and possibly even managed is called assignable variation. It's true. So any variation you can find, you can identify, and then you can manage it, can control it is what we call assignable. And the common variation is kind of a pure random variation. It based on the current technology you apply, the equipment, the system you use. Then it will be like really, really hard to identify like the variation, why the variation happens, and how to manage it. Okay. And then the third one is actually count for the calculation. So this is asking you to calculate the number of customers in queue and this coffee machine. So it's actually asking you to calculate LQ. Okay. And for the LQ, it equals to the lambda, which is the arrival rates squared divided by the service rate times service minus the, I mean, the arrival rate. So it asks you to find the LQ. You need to use that function. And for LQ, you need to figure out what is the lambda, what is the mu. So lambda is the arrival rate, and we can find from here. So it's at the rate of 20 per hour, and then we find like the for each of like the coffee production. I mean the produce. produce like a process, then it takes exactly 90 seconds. So 90 seconds is 1.5 minutes. And then we will be able to know the mu equals to. So the service rate will be, we have 6 minutes in hour, and we need 90 seconds for one coffee. So it will be 1.5 minutes. And we will be able to know the mu equals to 40. And mu equals, the service rate is 40 while the arrival rate is 20. So the alcohol will equals to lambda square, which is 20 times 20, and divided by the service rate times the service rate minus the arrival rate. So we will be able to find the final answer should be 0.5. So the correct answer should be number C. And this is what I mentioned like in the test two. So I will give you like the simple numbers, and you don't have to just like consider the whole process. I mean the whole calculation process. So this is the calculation problems for chapter 10, and all the calculation problems of chapter 10 in test 2 will be really, really similar to this one. Okay. And now this is actually example for the calculation for chapter 13. And this one asks you to find the upper limits of R charts. So for your homework, you need to do another, kind of calculations, because I gave you a random data set, and you need to find like the average R, then you find like the upper limits or the lower limits for R. But right now, I just gave you all the all the numbers you may need to use directly. So I gave you like the average range is 5, and the sample size is 10. So for R chart, the upper limits will equal to D4 times the average R. And the average range is 5. So we know R equals to 5. While we also know that like the D4, it depends on the sample size. Sample size is 10. So when sample size is 10, the D4 will be 1.78, and the average R is 5. So it times with 5, then we will be able to get the correct answer should be 8.9. So it should be option B. This is how we calculate that. And in the test too, you don't have to prepare for this table, because I will give you exactly while you're taking the exams. Okay. So this is all the review like for the test two, and I will open the test two for a whole week. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.